So, today in class, we're learning about the Constitution, and one of the activity that we're doing is why they didn't abolish slavery when they wrote the Constitution. So, I'm explaining to kids who is Thomas Jefferson, which we call TJ. So, I start to tell them about TJ and how TJ owned over 100 slaves, and that TJ was in the business of buying and selling people. And this is the same person who wrote the Declaration of Independence, or helped write it, because it was actually four of the people that helped write it. But write the Declaration of Independence saying that all men are created equal, they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, except it didn't apply to us, didn't apply to women, and didn't apply to Native Americans. So as I'm explaining this to the kids, that TJ was a slave owner of over 100 slaves, buying and selling people left and right, and was breaking up families that long ago. He was in the business of breaking up families, because I said, if I have a wife and I have three kids and you sell my three kids, that means you just broke up my family. Even if you sell one of my kids, you just broke up my family. So he was in the business of doing that. So then we got into the whole. So then I told him about, of course, Sally Hemings, and who Sally Hemings was. This young girl, and Thomas Jefferson's in his early 40s, and she's like 14, 15, 16 years old. She has five kids by him. The kids are just completely shocked. And I said, yeah, and this is the same person that we have buildings named after him, libraries named after him, Thomas Jefferson High School, Thomas Jefferson Middle School, Jefferson Boulevard, all these things named after this supposedly great man who did all these great things, this founding father, which he is no founding father of mine. And here he is, someone who is a racist. He's a pedophile because Sally Hemings was a kid, and he totally, obviously, supported slavery. But yet he writes in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, except for us. So the kids are just they're just floored. They're just shocked. They're all going, "Oh, that's so nasty. That's so nasty." And I said, "Yep, I know, I know." And then I told them that his Thomas Jefferson's wife and Sally Hemings are half sisters, and then they're grossed out by that or whatever. Um, and then I told them that Sally Hemings has these five kids, and Thomas Jefferson keeps them all enslaved until his death, and then even after his death, he still doesn't free them. But I found it so interesting, because that's the way I teach history to them. Because one of the kids asked, this girl asked, well, what about consent? And that just took me into a whole nother thing. So I said, well, this is what you had to remember back then, that if you were a white man, there is no consent, because you could do whatever you wanted to. These people were their property, and they saw them as nothing more than property. So therefore, you can do whatever you wanted to them. You could go down there and which they did, but I'm telling the kids, you can go down there to the slave quarters and have sexual relations with this man's wife or this man's daughter right in front of that man, and there was nothing that man could do about it. And that was a way to show the man that, you see, you're not even a man because you can't even protect your own family. These are the kinds of conversations that I have in my history class, because I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm not making Thomas Jefferson out to be some hero, because to me he's not. And if you really investigate history and evaluate history, you'll come to the same conclusion. I understand he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but it didn't apply to us. So why in the world would I hold him up to some position of greatness? But anyway, and so so I let them know back then it was a white male dominated society. Fast forward to today, I told them, and I said, look at even today, it is still a white male dominated society. because here we are 243 years later after declaring independence, that we still have the first woman this and the first woman that. We still have yet to have a female president. So it's still a white male dominated society. And I told them back then, because I think another student asked, well, couldn't they do something about it? And I said, who are they going, who are they going to go to? Everyone in government, as we're establishing government, is white. All the business owners are white men in government and the business owners. The doctors, the dentists are all white men. The plantation owners, for the great majority, are white men until they die off and they leave it to their wives or whatever. So there was nowhere you could go. And we even got into the conversation of, that's why so many of us, that's why this lighter skin, all these different shades that we have. And I said, because because not every black family knows this, but almost every black family, if you trace your roots, you will find somebody white in your family, just like there's somebody white in my family that we know about. But it was a really pretty interesting conversation, and we even talked about, if the master had a choice with these kids that he would have with these slave women, either they would be free and able to go to school, or he would keep them enslaved like Thomas Jefferson did. And they would be enslaved, and they would be treated just like any other slave. They would could be beat, could be whipped, could be sold if he or she needed the money, and they were just floored. And then you could see the mouths just hanging open, that they just couldn't believe it. And I said, yes, this institution of slavery is so much bigger than what you have been taught so far, that just a few people were enslaved and were in chains, and yes, we had slavery, but it's so much bigger than what is what I'm telling the kids. But that's the way I teach my history classes, and because that's the truth that the kids need to know, and that's the truth that people keep doing research on and putting out there for us history teachers to teach these kids, just like the 1619 Project. It is to take that information back into the classroom and teach these kids the true history of what was going on. And slavery was a sick, sick, sick business. When you do a lot of reading and research on what exactly was going on, not only in this country, but in the Caribbean, because when you understand how sick these people were with the punishment that was done in the Caribbean, called Derby's Dose, then you understand these were some sick, sick individuals. Because Derby's Dose was this. Derby was a slave, and the plantation owner, who was from England, when a slave got in trouble, which a slave did, for eating weed or something because he was hungry or whatever. But anyway, he got in trouble. Well, that other slave would have to take Derby's Dose. And by the way, you can look this up on the internet. It's there. And I'll get the book later if anyone wants to know where I read this in the book. But you would have to take Derby's Dose. And Derby's Dose was, Derby would defecate or take a dump in the other slave's mouth. I know. It's so sick, I know. But that's Derby's Dose. And they realized that the slave was spitting it out, and so they would put something over the slave's mouth, a gag. They would gag the slave's mouth so they couldn't spit it out for a couple of hours. So now you're ingestating, obviously, someone else's feces. This is how sick this institution of slavery was. And a lot of people don't know this. But you only know it when you start reading, or at least looking at videos of historians who have done the research. But it is sick. And so some people would say, well, why do we need to know that now, today? Because it helps you understand where we came from and what we came out of, and we're still here, for one. For two, just to understand how sick people were back then, to get a broader, more in depth understanding of slavery and how sick that institution was. I'm telling you, when you read some of these books, you are floored. And I know some people are like, well, I don't want to read it, I don't want to know about it. Well, then you don't want to know what has happened in this country. Then you don't want to know why you're in the situation, why we are in the situation that we are in. The only way that you're going to understand why we're in the situation that we're in is by researching that history, by researching the history of slavery in this country and what was done to people in this country and in the Caribbean. Absolutely sick. But anyway, back to Thomas Jefferson. So I laid it all out for them. I told them about Sally Hemings and Monticello, and you can visit Monticello today, and in the Five Kids, and we know all this because there's been a book written by the descendants of Sally Hemings. But I want them to have a full picture of who Thomas Jefferson was, and the same with George Washington, who owned over 300 people, because he had about 120, and then when he married Martha Washington, she brought in another 180 plus slaves. So they had over 300 slaves buying and selling, buying and selling. Another one, breaking up families. But we hold him up: George Washington High School, George Washington University, Washington Boulevard, George Washington Boulevard, and we hold these men up, these men who were racists and pedophiles, and we hold them up and we name buildings after them and schools after them. That is what is so sick. And a lot of people just don't know that history. So that's the way that I teach my classes. And that's the history that my students are getting. They're getting the true history, because that's the way it's supposed to be. That's why this history is here. I told them this is what's called historical facts, that this is history that they can look up and see for themselves, that this is history that was written by the actual people, which means it is primary sources and not rewritten by someone else who could change it. You can do the same thing, but I just thought I would share that with you because it was such an interesting conversation, and that took about 30 35 minutes of class time. But I want them to know that history, and I want them to know that truth about Thomas Jefferson, simply because we started this unit, this topic on the Constitution, and they need to know who Thomas Jefferson was. Just like they need to know every single signer on the Declaration of Independence. There was 56 men, only white men, who signed the Declaration of Independence, and every single one of them was either a slave owner or supported slavery. Every single one of them. Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, all of them either supported slavery or was a slave owner, and then you're going to write a document saying that all men are created equal. Come on, really? But this is the history that the kids don't know, and this is the history that they need to know. So, just like Maya Angelou used to say, once you know, now you know. You can't say you don't know, because now you know. Or now you know, now that you know, do better. Whatever the quote is, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I love teaching history. I love teaching them the truth. We've already trampled all over Christopher Columbus and proved that lie. That some history teachers out there, elementary teachers, are still teaching kids that Christopher Columbus discovered America, that Christopher Columbus discovered these United States, and he didn't discover anything because people were already here. He never even came to the United States, and yet we have a holiday for this man who was a murderer, kidnapper, rapist, pedophile, and when we celebrate a holiday for him every year. This is absolutely ridiculous. But again, this is what I wanted you to know. This is what I teach my kids in the class. I teach them the historical facts. That is the true history. And if they want to go to Monticello, I told them it's right there in Virginia. If they ever go to Virginia, that they should visit Monticello, and check it out. I want to go there too because they talk about Sally Hemings. It's not some hidden secret. Part of the whole tour, part of the whole thing is talking about Sally Hemings. So that is right out front. So anyway, so I just wanted to share that with you. I just thought it was a really good conversation today and really opened some eyes to who Thomas Jefferson was. It's not to throw shade at Thomas Jefferson. It's to throw the truth about Thomas Jefferson, um, and any of the other ones, George Washington too as well. And I still have some more things to tell them about George Washington, and we haven't even got to the unit on slavery yet. And there's so much more that I have to tell them that is in connection to today. This is how excited I get in my classroom. So, because once you know so much information, you just want to share it. So anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to let you know that's how my class went today. And really, really, really good conversation. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I told them about. Good old TJ is what we call him. Good old TJ. Yeah. No, that's pretty much it. All right, you guys have a good night. Catch you later.